You like dogs, if you grew up around dogs, if you have a dog right now. It's a lot of people. Well, you're not alone. According to the ASPCA, about 37 to 47% of all U.S. households have dogs. It's not a surprise. They're very friendly. They're loving animals. They're great companion pets. What might surprise you is about 31% of all dogs that enter shelters are killed because of a lack of room. I grew up around dogs myself. I love them. I've worked for volunteer shelters, even organizations like Guide Dogs for the Blind. And it breaks my heart to see dogs killed in such high numbers. There's two main reasons why this is happening. Misconceptions about purebreds and misunderstandings about shelter dogs in general. That's what I want to cover today, but most importantly, I want to go over what we can do to lower this number. So let's start with purebreds. The main idea about a purebred dog is that it's the best example of what a breed should be. You guarantee physical characteristics and to an extent, behavior by getting a purebred. In truth, all you're really getting is a guarantee of lineage, and even that's not guaranteed. Here's a fact, 90% of all purebred dog breeds were created in just the last 100 years. Back when eugenics was a very popular concept, the wealthy would competitively dog breed as a hobby just to see what they could come up with. Eventually, kennel clubs started to codify some of these breeds, but that's all it really was, an arbitrary designation based on what was popular at the time. So fast forward to now. The problem is we know more about genetics now than they did then. According to a G. Leroy study in the Animal Genetics Journal, almost all purebred breeds today have some form of physical or mental health condition as a result of the century breeding, most of which was inbreeding. Mother-son, father-daughter, even grandparent-grandchild breedings were encouraged by kennel clubs because they wanted to keep desired aesthetic characteristics in the breed. But the problem is this often led to malformities that we now consider common in these breeds. Here's some examples from a Science and Dogs publication that shows the difference. This is a bull terrier from 100 years ago, and here's what they look like now. If you can see the deformities in the skull that have resulted, this often leads to extra teeth and also conditions like syringomelia, where the brain grows too big for the skull, leading to severe pain and other mental conditions. This breed in particular has a problem with compulsive tail chasing. Here's another example. This is an English bulldog 100 years ago. Here's what they look like today. Their heads are so small that they can't be born naturally anymore. They have to be delivered by a C-section. But their noses are so small and squished in rather that they can't breathe well. They almost all have hip dysplasia. They have ingrown tails occasionally, and their average life expectancy has dropped to about 6 years. But this is the standard that kennel clubs have for the breed, so this is the fate of these dogs. Here's my worst example. This is a Rhodesian Ridgeback dog. According to a BBC documentary called Pedigree Dogs Exposed, it's fairly normal for 1 or 2 dogs in every couple litters to be born without this characteristic ridge. Kennel clubs used to advise that these dogs be culled or killed based on how they looked. Now bear in mind, this is a spinal deformity. Dogs without this ridge are healthier than dogs with it, but they didn't look right, so they couldn't be called Ridgebacks, and thus they were killed just because of how they looked. When the documentary came out, Kennel Club sent out a memorandum in cover your ass mode, basically saying, hey, don't kill dogs because of how they look anymore. Not everyone listened. That's just purebreds. What about shelter? One of the main misconceptions about shelter dogs is that they're there because they're undesirable or they've displayed some characteristic or trait, like aggression, that landed them there. This is almost never the case. I spoke with Chelsea Fletcher, a veterinary technician who's worked with dogs from shelters for over 10 years. What she told me is that the biggest problem facing shelter dogs is misunderstandings about their aggression rates. But points out that of all the dog bites that have ever been recorded, almost all of them are from unaltered animals, which means dogs that have not been spayed or neutered. According to a study by Robert Lockwood, the spaying or neutering of an animal greatly reduces its aggression. There are also factors such as training and socialization that factor in, but the main thing is spaying or neutering, which is what happens to shelter dogs. But that's just aggression. There's also health benefits. The kennel clubs have made a successful mindset that having a purebred dog is the best dog to have, but in fact, mutts have the greatest health. Mutts are dogs that have no determined breed. They've just been bred naturally through matings of different breeds. They have greater genetic variability as a result. Chelsea taught me the term hybrid vigor, which means that dogs that have had this benefit have greater health, better immune systems, and are just better balanced overall as a result. But neither of these facts help the nearly 1/3 of dogs that are being killed in shelters because of a lack of room. Even no-kill shelters like the Working Humane Society are going to run out of room, resources, and availability, and they're going to have to close their doors eventually. The dogs they can't take are then going to end up in another shelter, and that might be a kill shelter. So don't think no-kill shelters are the answer. Joshua Frank put out a publication that concluded thusly: the overpopulation of companion pets is a human-created problem with significant human costs that can only be addressed by human actions. This leads me into my last point. We need to recognize the value in adoption, not just the monetary value, because adopting a pet is almost always cheaper than buying from a breeder or, God forbid, a puppy. When you adopt a dog, you're getting a healthier, more balanced animal, but you're also saving the animal's life, and you're doing your part to reduce pet overpopulation. Chelsea says, though, that yes, some of you in here live in dorms or are in an untenable situation where you can't adopt a dog, and that's okay because there's still much that you can do to help shelters. If you can't adopt, you can volunteer at a shelter. They always need help. If you can't do that, you can foster a dog, giving it a temporary home away from the shelter and helping its mental well-being, which then helps it get adopted. If you can't do any of this, there's still something. At most shelters, they have a donations needed list of items such as food, bleach, towels, collars, leashes, even toys. Anything that makes the shelter a less scary and overwhelming place for an animal will help its mental well-being and will help it get adopted. The Oregon Humane Society's address is 1067 Northeast Columbia Boulevard, and their number is 503-285-7722. I'll have this for anyone that needs it after the speech. These guys have events every day where they have their dogs on display, and you can join them as a volunteer or even just a supporter at any of these events, and that would help a lot. So I've gone into pedigree dogs and why that's not necessarily a value statement and some of the misconceptions about shelter dogs, but most importantly, I've talked about what we can do to help reduce this high number of dogs being killed. Bear in mind, please, that I am not blaming purebred dogs for anything. They're still loving animals, and most of the people that breed them, with the exception of puppy mills, are not evil. The problem is that they are contributing to an unsustainable population problem by creating dogs that conform to an arbitrary standard that guarantees almost they're going to have physical and mental health conditions, while healthy and otherwise happy dogs get killed. How they do or do not look. They are forcing our pets, our loved ones, to experience unnecessary suffering. If you've been fortunate enough to spend some time with a dog or have one in your life, you know these animals deserve our best. So please, let's give them our best. Thank you.